Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining excuse me, for joining us today for our event. The title for our webinar today is our Evolving Geoscience World, How Are Academic Departments Responding? So we're really excited to have our panelists join us today to have this really important conversation. So for the agenda today, we're going to do brief introductions. The panelists are going to introduce themselves. We'll have a few polling questions. The first 30 minutes are going to be prepared questions, and then the last 20 minutes will be dedicated to audience Q&A. So you can either input your questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand to ask your question live. And we also ask that if you would like to ask your question anonymously, you can directly message Stefano, and you will remain anonymous, and we can ask your question on your behalf if you prefer that. So good afternoon. My name is Nicole Gonzalez. I am a geology master's student at the University of Texas at Austin, studying reservoir scale shallow marine stratigraphy. I joined the AAPG Women's Network in April of this year as a graduate student representative. Rachelle?
Just one second.
Oh.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rachelle Kernen. I am currently an exploration geologist who has pivoted their career from petroleum into the mineral industry. And soon, in about 6 weeks, I'll be moving to Australia for a postdoc that I was actually supposed to start right when the pandemic hit back in April 2020. And for that postdoc, I'll be researching solutions in carbon capture and hydrogen storage. I am a past chair of the AAPG Women's Network and co-founder of the AAPG Salt Basins Technical Interest Group. So the motivation for this webinar. So due to rapidly changing landscape of the geoscience discipline, accelerated by the pandemic, the future of traditional geoscience degrees and programs is coming into question. With geoscience programs losing enrollment globally, how can we innovate to transform geoscience degrees and programs to remain relevant? Climate change is accelerating at levels we have not experienced before, and many geoscience initiatives are emphasizing the importance of reaching net zero by 2050 and are embracing the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. The goal of this webinar is to provide a platform where information can be exchanged about how not only reinvent and create
Al is going to be on the thing tomorrow.
Geoscience programs and degrees within universities, but how can those programs be more equitable, just, and fair for all? One of our guests today, Dr. Paul Bierman, recently wrote an article in Science this past January 2021 about high quality research that brought in significant grant money that was not enough to save his geology department from being closed. Dr. Bierman's advice and warning in this article is the key motivation for this event, and we look forward to hearing more from all of our panelists. For today's webinar, we have Dr. Camelia Knapp, Dr. Claudia Mora, and Dr. Paul Bierman joining us to discuss how their departments are changing as our geoscience world evolves. Thank you all so much for being here today.
Thank you, Rachelle.
Great. Thank you so much, Rachelle. So right now we are going to show, like on your screen, you will have 2 poll questions that are going to pop up. And so we'd like everyone to answer those questions. The first one being, are you a member of the AAPG Women's Network? And we also just want to gauge who is joining our call today and who's participating in this conversation. So go ahead and answer that.
All right, we're still getting a lot of responses. Once that response rate slows, I will go ahead and share the results. All right, we have slowed at this point. All right, so I'm closing it and sharing.
Great. Okay. So it seems that A big percentage said, nope, how do I sign up, which is awesome. So if you check the chat, there's a link for how you can sign up to become a part of the Women's Network. And we see the majority of the people joining us are faculty and staff, as well as students and some professionals, a few retired, and then 2% is other. So thank you, that's awesome. All righty, okay, so we're gonna jump right into the panelists and our prepared questions. So panelists, please give us an overview of who you are, what your role is, and what you do currently. Paul, we'll start with you.
Okay, well, thank you so much for having me, and thanks to some of my former colleagues for jumping in here, and some people I know from graduate school. It's good to see your names. I'm a professor now of the Environment and Natural Resources and a fellow in the Gund Institute for Environment at the University of Vermont. I mentor students at all levels, from high school to postdocs. I've been faculty here at UVM for 28 years, and I love the institution, I love Vermont, and I'm really excited about the people I'm privileged to work alongside here. I'm a geomorphologist and geochemist by training, but I'd have to say that education and science communication are really my passions. Currently teach a large gen ed class in earth hazards, a mixed level large class in climate change, and I facilitate graduate seminars in environmental geology and science communication, including one this fall in the science and logic of climate denial. I'm a co-author of 2 textbooks, one on geomorphology, the other on environmental geology. I have 2 more in preparation, as well as a trade book on the history of Arctic science in Greenland and climate change and how we know it. At UVM, I oversee a clean lab supported by the US National Science Foundation. It's a national facility for cosmogenic isotope sample processing. It's a new approach we've purposefully designed to help increase diversity in STEM by bringing people from around the world to a unique lab to process their own samples and learn the techniques and what they have to do to get their data. My research has focused on the rates and dates of surface processes. I'm very interested in erosion, deposition, and their interaction with climate, people, and the solid earth. And I just want to say thanks for having me.
Great, thank you so much, Paul. Camilla? Oh, Camilla, you're muted.
You think you'll know that by now. Well, so hello, everyone. I'm very honored to be here today with this amazing group of colleagues, and I'm really excited to talk about geosciences. So I'm Camelia Knapp. I'm a professor of geophysics, the V. Brown Monet Chair of Petroleum Geology, and current head of the Boone Pickens School of Geology at Oklahoma State University. I received my PhD in geophysics from Cornell University, and I also hold a BS in geophysical engineering from the University of Bucharest, where I grew up. I first came to the United States as a Fulbright Fellow at Cornell University. I'm a big fan of the Fulbright program, both ways. In the early years, I worked with the Romanian National Oil Company and the Romanian National Institute for Earth Physics. And I spent 18 years at the University of South Carolina, where I was a professor and the director of the Earth Sciences and Resources Institute before transitioning to Oklahoma 3 years ago. I was also an undergraduate director there, and that's where I was working hard on enrollments, how to boost up enrollments in geosciences, particularly geology and geophysics. So here in my role as school head at Oklahoma State University, I oversee the Boone Pickens School of Geology budget, curriculum, personnel, fundraising, alumni relations, student success, faculty and staff morale, and the list goes on. I hear that being department head or chair is the toughest job on campus. I live it every day and I am enjoying it. My time and effort here is 50% administration and 50% divided among research, teaching, and service. And most of my current research here or in the past years has been in carbon capture, utilization and storage, and gas hydrates.
Thank you, Camelia. Claudia?
Hi, Nicole, and hi, Rachelle. Thank you very much for this invitation to join. I'm pretty excited to listen to see what people have to say. As you mentioned, I'm the Dean of the Jackson School of Geosciences at the University of Texas at Austin. I've been here about 18 months, which put me here about a month before COVID arrived in Texas, or arrived in the US. And so I've pretty much been a dean in a bubble until this last semester. As a dean, well, Camilla, you had the long list. I do a little bit of everything, but my role is really to promote and to facilitate as much as I can the geoscience education and research at the Jackson School. And the Jackson School it includes a large geoscience department, the Department of Geological Sciences, and also two fairly large research units, the UT Institute for Geophysics and the Bureau of Economic Geology in Texas, which also functions as the Texas State Survey. Prior to coming to the Jackson School, I had a two-step career. I've now made it three-step, so I'm not sure I'm in step with Texas, but I started at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville as a professor. I was and eventually department head. I was there for 18 years and made a somewhat abrupt career change at age 50 to accommodate my spouse's needs for his career. And I went to Los Alamos National Laboratory, where I worked primarily at the group and division level as a research line manager, with pretty much all the same roles that I have now. Despite being a sort of a shock to my system, the job at Los Alamos really left a strong imprint on me in getting me to really appreciate the value and the professional satisfaction of doing mission-driven research. That is research where the focus is actually to address a specific large challenge. And increasingly, I believe that this is where all academic science is going to be going as well, because the challenges we face as a nation and as a globe are so large and so complex. So in context of my career, I actually, as a professor, my research used stable isotopes to look at fluid rock interaction and paleoclimate, paleoatmospheric CO2 levels, and also extreme climate events. And then as a national lab researcher and manager, I directed my skills more towards research in energy science, subsurface energy science specifically, and non-proliferation and national security. So I've kind of been around the block, but worked on all kinds of things around the block. And I'm really happy to be back in academia and working here at the Jackson School.
Awesome. Thank you so much for those introductions. We'll start our moderated session now. So to begin, Paul, we'll start with you for our first question. In the article you posted in Science, you talk about the dean's decision to terminate the geology department due to financial crunch amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Could you comment on the reasons you chose to be so public about this, and perhaps elaborate on the different pressures universities put on academic departments?
Thanks, Rachelle. I'll do my best here. I spoke out because I care really deeply about the University of Vermont as an institution, Vermont as a state, and earth science as a way of thinking that I believe is just critical to an educated society, be that finding resources, dealing with environmental issues, or addressing climate change. I wrote because geology has been my professional life for more than 40 years now, and I was really deeply hurt by what I saw happening to our program. And that's a program that was built by faculty and students and staff over decades who worked incredibly hard, and literally in one day it ended. And so writing is both my way, I think, of processing that grief and of sharing it, and of making others aware that this could happen to them in any academic department at any time if they take their existence for granted. So it was really both a professional and a personal piece. And I say the any department because I got dozens of emails after this was published, and at least half of them were not from geoscience departments. They were from other STEM disciplines. So UVM geology was not large, but I would argue that we were vital, and we trained geoscientists for the state and for the region at both the undergrad and grad level. Some of us taught very large, successful gen ed classes. We made service to the university. Our students published their work in good journals. They worked for state agencies. Some of them went on to get doctorates. Over and over, I'd say they made UVM proud. They put UVM in the news, in glossy university publications, when they presented at meetings, and when they took jobs. We had a really solid reputation in the region, and I would say around the country. I wrote the working life piece because as a faculty member, sort of deeply involved in my profession, both at the national and international level, I couldn't stand by and watch a single administration terminate what many people told us before and after was one of the most vibrant master's level training programs in the country. It's a program that trains students who brought their geoscience expertise to various things. We have many students placed in consulting firms, many in state government, a few in academia, and some in NGOs. So a real breadth of training that really actually didn't depend much on what they studied at Vermont. They went on to mix and match it for jobs, which I think was just a testament to the fact that our entire faculty was teaching people how to think and how to work and how to be flexible in their future endeavors. So with a small faculty of 8 people, we could not do everything. There was a balance, and we focused on research, on grants, on publishing, on mentoring students, on gen ed teaching, and on service. Clearly, it was not enough because our current administration chose one and only one metric, undergrad majors, that were insufficient. That was mixed up with cost and the pandemic, but what we heard over and over, and is in the justification for termination of our department now, is a lack of undergrad majors. It was our weak point. I will go to my grave thinking we could and should have done better, but we were human, and there are only so many hours in a day. And the expectations were so high to do everything, and we missed it on the one that turned out to be the vital piece on there. We did a lot this spring together, apart. We had differences between us. We all were working to the same goal, but nothing changed. The department at the end of the year will be terminated. It will be absorbed into or merged with the geography department. There'll be 4 teaching faculty where there were once 8, and there's not much else for me to say except this happened to us. It could happen to anyone, anywhere, anytime. I think if we're not looking ahead toward what our discipline needs to be.
Thank you, Paul, so much for sharing that with us and for being transparent in your experience. Claudia, do you have any reaction to what Paul just said?
I think what I agree with Paul in the sense that geoscience is incredibly relevant, but we also tend to be an invisible science to administrators, especially upper administrators, and to students to a certain degree. And this has always hurt geology departments, at least everyone I've ever been part of. Geology departments do tend to have lower enrollments than the other physical sciences like chemistry, physics, and biology. And that leaves them defending their numbers to administration. In part, that's because we also face the issue that students are arriving at the university without much understanding of what earth science is, what geology is. They are, unlike math or chemistry or biology, they have not encountered, in general, have not encountered geoscience inside their high school curriculum. I think in many K-12 systems, earth science is taught in 8th grade. And even when there are courses on climate or environmental change, for example, courses in the an AP course in environmental sciences, it tends to be taught by someone who is not a geoscientist. And so even then students see a fairly skewed understanding of the system because they're being taught by a biologist, for example. And they tend to see climate change, environmental sciences as something you do from a biology major or from a chemistry major. And so I think these 2 factors really put us behind the 8 ball before we even start. And the best thing that any of us can do is to make sure that we frequently and loudly assert our position on campus by finding ways into the campus news, hopefully good ones related to things that we do, finding our by using our time with the provost and the president to remind them of the importance of geoscience and to remind them of what we do and why it's different than all the other sciences. So I guess that's what I would add.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that response. Camila, do you have a reaction or a response to what Paul shared with us about his department closing?
I do, and I really appreciate Paul and Claudia sharing your thoughts. For one thing, we really need to act as a united front. I mean, geoscientists, we really need to work together. So what I came to appreciate in my career by serving at different academic institutions is that one size does not fit all. While there are common traits, colleges and universities are led and managed differently, depending on their budget models. And the large categories fall under a centralized or decentralized system. In other words, who has the money, for the academic programs, the president, the provost, or the deans? And with this money structure come the expectations that are either set at the university or college levels. I served at two different universities after my PhD, both designated as R1 doctoral universities by the Carnegie classification as very high research activity, and that's the University of South Carolina and Oklahoma State University. However, the two departments that I've been with are very different, and a lot of differences come from the geography and demographics. I feel that the departments need to pay out their strengths while reaching out to a broader and more diverse population. We took quite the opposite approach here at OSU, and our strategy has been to expand our portfolio. We are fortunate to have a very engaged advisory board that is hands-on and wants us to be successful. Since 3 years ago, when my husband and I joined OSU, we've been working together on updating our strategic plan and included a strategy for expansion with goals and metrics. Therefore, in the last 3 years, we've added 4 options in our BS in geology major, an environmental petroleum pre-law and secondary teacher certification. We added a major and a minor in geophysics. We added an accelerated master's path, as well as a 5-year BS to MBA program and a professional science master's in geosciences with concentrations in petroleum geosciences, hydrogeology, and geophysics, while adding now a carbon capture, utilization, and storage focus. Because of this broadening of our scope, while maintaining our core teaching and research, we are in the process now of changing the name of our school to Boone Pickens School of Geosciences. So the outlook of geosciences would be brighter if there were greater clarity about how the science is applied or can be applied to societal, economic, and environmental challenges. And to this end, we have been in discussions now with Maria Angela Capello. Many of you may have heard about her or may have been in her webinar. So she is the leading author of the leading edge article, the Geophysical Sustainability Atlas, mapping geophysics to the UN or United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Maria Angela is a board member of SEG and expert in sustainability, reservoir management, talent management, and diversity and inclusion. So to close this, we as geoscientists, we know we are relevant, sustainable, resilient, and relevant, but we need to have this united front to tell the world all of this.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. We'll move on to our second question. Claudia, this is for you to answer first. Students are often under the impression that professors prefer PhD students because they get more out of them, quote unquote, meaning more publications, research, more of their time. But industries like oil and gas often prefer master's students. How does UT plan on keeping a balance between the MS and the PhD programs?
I think like many R1 universities, the University of Texas has moved over the past 20 years, and certainly the Jackson School as well, moved towards graduate programs that focused on the training of PhDs rather than masters. And these come from the pressures across the board. The universities feel pressure to compete for external funding to a large extent because that is the greatest portion, that forms the greatest portion of their funding. Even the large state universities in general tend to get less than 10% of their actual funding from the state. And we're talking billions of dollars a year. And so this has to come in through external funding. And that translated to pressure on faculty to meet the expectations of the university by increased research productivity and grantsmanship. And then in turn, that the faculty felt that PhD students who spend more time here and are much more substantially engaged in research would be the preferred student. So this has happened, I mean, this happened everywhere as far as I know in a research university. But I think we're all starting to step back and to consider one of the fundamental reasons why we are in academia, and that is student interest, student education, and meeting the expectations of our students to help them prepare for professional opportunities in their futures. And I don't mean by that vocational training, but to give them the skills they need to be successful in a career that will likely change multiple times through their lifetime. And I think in the geosciences in particular, of all the physical sciences, the master's degree is still a very operational degree. It's still the preferred degree for people who are moving out into industry of pretty much any type, not exclusively, but of most types. And I think it's important that we keep that option available to our students and that we value the education of master's students as much as we do of PhD students. So how are we doing this at home? How do we do this at home? The first is by assuring that we commit resources to master's students as surely as we do to PhDs. A master's student should not have to pay for their own degree simply because they want to do a master's degree and not a PhD. And secondly is we also need to assure that we restructure our performance evaluations system to value the faculty who spend time mentoring these students. And my role then is to make certain that the provost and the president understand this change and understand that this is really a vibrant master's program in the geosciences is a way that we can have greater, not lesser impact on our state, on the country, and on the people we serve, specifically the students we serve. And so I'm still in discussion. I'm in discussion with the faculty about this. I haven't been here a long time, but I think many people are fully subscribed to the idea that a master's student can be a very important part of our program. But we do need to change the structure, and we need to make sure that everyone can succeed in this model. And so this is something I'm putting a lot of attention to right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. You actually received a thumbs up from Victoria out in our audience. So thank you for that feedback. I will pass the torch over to Nicole, and she'll continue on with the next session.
Yes. Thank you guys so much. I love this discussion. Okay, so now we're going to kind of jump into questions about curriculum. Camilla, we will direct this question to you first. Clearly, society and industries are changing. We're interested in new areas such as geothermal energy and carbon capture. What are some strategies for preparing students for these evolving careers in industry and academia?
So Nicole, if you allow me to just follow up on the previous question.
Absolutely.
You know, because I just have a little bit to add up to that. And again, you know, it is like, you know, departments are different, you know. So here at OSU, we have a fairly young PhD program as of 2010. Historically, we've had a very strong master's program, and we still have, you know, so our department is 70 plus years old. But while we are maintaining that pace, you know, this academic year, for instance, we are striking a balance, and we have currently 38 masters and 37 PhD students. The demographics is quite different. The master students are mostly from the United States, you know, primarily from the mid-continent. The majority of our PhD students are international. But I would say that, you know, here at OSU, everyone is valued equally. I mean, we just don't have that issue. You know, maybe because we are a smaller school, you know, I mean, that's why it's so great to have these different departments, in, you know, in this webinar, because we come with different cultures, different geography, you know, and, you know, different kinds of states, you know, energy states versus non-energy states. So I just have to say that for question number 2, we just don't have that kind of issue here at OSU. You know, quite honestly, we've had to work hard to build our PhD program, you know, because, you know, we've just had, you know, a BS and masters. Okay, so I just kind of wanted to say that, you know, before moving into your next question, which is about changing industries. Yeah, you know, this is, you know, such a hot topic. You know, we hear about energy transition, and many of us don't even know what that means. You know, maybe some of us, you know, in geosciences, you know, have a glimpse of that. You know, okay, we kind of think we know, but if you ask, you know, people outside of our field, that may be a question that kind of gets lost. You know, it sounds good though. So anyway, so my answer is, as a land grant university that Oklahoma State is, you know, we do have a mission, and then the mission is to prepare students for success. You know, so that's you know, indeed the landscape, you know, has been changing in our profession, and we as educators need to stay ahead of the wave. So sometimes it's hard to predict, like COVID, right? You know, who would have known that the price of oil goes negative? You know, we are actually in a town hall meeting, and somebody says, you know, the price of oil is 0. And, you know, we just see that happening, and somebody else says, oh no, it's minus. You know, it was already, you know, it was, you know, just watching that happening. But, you know, I kind of feel that, you know, being in this profession, I've tried to promote the field of geosciences for the longest, you know, I can remember. So as one of my friends, you know, stated at the AAPGCCUS, and that stands for Carbon Capture, Utilization and Storage meeting last spring, the global problems we must solve now don't fit into silos. So unlike other larger departments here at OSU, we've had room to grow, and we've expanded our program offerings quite rapidly, as I already mentioned, in the last 3 years. You know, like our professional science masters in geosciences program that was just approved, we are now adding the CCUS, or carbon capture, utilization and storage component. In addition, with support from the National Groundwater Association, we just established a certificate program in drilling basics. And this is to support not only the oil and gas, but CCUS, environmental, and potentially the geothermal industries. More than 50% of research funding in our school comes from the Department of Energy for either unconventional resources or from geological and geophysical characterization for carbon storage. And a good number of our graduate students work on these funded projects, you know, here in Oklahoma, Alabama, Mississippi, South Carolina, Georgia, and Arkansas. We are part of the Southeastern Carbon Sequestration Partnership. And we are quite happy about that. So from my perspective, we aim to provide the students with a deep understanding of the geoscience concepts and processes and gain transferable competencies and skills to help them be adaptable in their careers. So students need to develop skills that make them attractive to both academia and non-academic employers. And as you hear a lot about energy transition or energy integration, gaining depth in the core area of expertise and breadth in other relevant areas makes our students more marketable. Critical thinking, problem solving, with verbal and written communication skills, a higher level of quantitative and computational skills, all help in achieving a higher level of success in this more and more competitive market. And public and community engagements are important too, as it prepares students to work with people from different backgrounds and cultures and helps them polishing interpersonal and leadership skills. So to this end, we have 7 very active student organizations. The last charter, Cowboy Energy, is interdisciplinary. It's a student association among geology, School of Business, and petroleum engineering. And we are trying to help them with all of their activities. So I'll stop here.
No, thank you so much. That's all really great stuff. Paul, I want to, have you comment on this question as well. What are some of the strategies that, you guys are doing to prepare your students for this evolving employment landscape? Has your teaching changed? Elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah. I don't want to say you guys. I think I'm more comfortable saying myself at this point, because I'm actually no longer a member of the geology department at UVM. So I'm going to keep to my own piece on this. But for me, I think it has changed somewhat. I mean, in the last couple of years, I've moved to teaching a climate change course that focuses both on paleoclimate and current climate and future, knowing that that is a basic competency that many, many students at the university need to have, including our geoscience students, but not limited to our geoscience students that we have here. My graduate seminars have increasingly focused on communication, on writing, and not only formal writing. They were always involved with paper reviews and formal reviews, but they've switched to informal writing, which is how I actually stumbled on the working life genre and have worked with my students. And in fact, 2 of the students in my seminar last spring have published their own working life pieces. They're 2 amazing pieces from 2 fantastic women. One's a geoscientist and one is not. And I can throw those into the chat if people want to see that kind of thing. I think what struck me about the last 2 conversations was that we are a very different institution than the 2 others that are being talked about. We are a small state institution. We were a master's level program only, but faced pressure for many years under several presidents to get a doctorate. And our department almost uniformly pushed back and said, with 6 to 8 faculty, we can't do it. And one of our former chairs did an amazing survey and basically said, if you don't have 12 faculty, it's hopeless to have a meaningful doctorate program. You just can't, you can't do it by looking. She looked at all the other programs and the metrics. And it has popped up once again, which is, I think, very interesting listening to Claudia, in that our current administration is focused on bringing us to R1. And with that, pushing PhD programs. And I think, as you said, perhaps we have not done a good enough job of educating them that the terminal degree in geoscience for most employment is the master's. And so, that all plays into how we're teaching and what we're teaching. And personally, I've trained, I think, 10 PhD students now and 31 master's students, so sort of a 3-to-1 ratio. And I'm very comfortable with that. And my doctoral students have always been through another very interdisciplinary program on campus, which has worked, I think, beautifully for them because they've gone into academia, they've gone into industry, but having that interdisciplinary background, the ability that both of you have mentioned about talking across disciplines, that's probably the most important thing we give to our students now, knowing full well that 20 years from now, they're not going to be doing the job we trained them for today, that the world is changing so fast. So if I had to boil it down, it's teach the students basic skills in communication, data analysis, data presentation, critical thinking.
Great. Paul, I just wanted to kind of go off of what you said. You had to choose another department to join after the Department of Vermont dissolved. And I want you to kind of share with everyone, how do you bring geoscience curriculum into a different science department? What does that look like? And is there like a department that's a natural fit for the geoscience curriculum?
Oh my, that's a loaded question and a long story, so I'll try to keep it short. So I'll tell a little bit about my path. I mean, I was in geology until July 1 when my dean moved me to the chemistry department. And jokingly, I could say maybe it's because I had geochemistry in my description that he thought I'd fit over there. But I am a geochemist only in name. You know, my last chemistry course was like 1984, and I don't want to tell you guys the grade I got in it. I love chemistry. I do it all the time, but organic chemistry was not my friend at that point. And I certainly, don't teach it. So the transition for me was move out of geology, move to chemistry, and then due to a lot of hard work by a lot of people at the university to bring me in a department where I'd had a secondary appointment for 20 odd years. And that was the School of the Environment and Natural Resources. And for me personally, it's a really good fit. I'm an interdisciplinary person by nature. I think across disciplines. I work with all kinds of people. I like engaging with the social science piece of it. So I'm a geologist there, but I'm part of a team that has ecologists and biologists and foresters and social science people across, a 40 odd faculty with a hugely different focus. So it's a very different place to be because I'm one of a kind. And I guess as a geomorphologist, that's typically what we are in departments anyway. You don't hire, you hire an igneous petrologist and a sedimentary petrologist and a metamorphic petrologist, but usually you hire one Earth surface person. So it's very rare, except for the biggest schools, to have multiple people. So that doesn't bother me. In particular, I'm very happy to be in a place that has a large and vital graduate program right now at both the master's and PhD level, and also has a real fundamental dedication to diversity and inclusion. So I bring my expertise in surface process and environmental geology. I bring my expertise in climate history and climate change into a school where it's a good fit. But it's very different. I don't have colleagues that I've had in the past in the same way. I presume they will develop, but I've only been working with these people for 10 weeks now, not 27 years. But they're folks I've known from the past. And so I guess what I've done is sort of dedicated to making the best of it and trying specifically to be part of teaching the Earth as part of a system. And my part in that system is the rocks and the soil and the water and the climate. And there are other people in the system doing the birds and the bugs and the trees and the people and their interaction. And so for me, that's an excellent fit. For others, it would not be as good a fit, depending on what they do. So I think it's really going to depend around the world and in different places where the best fit for geoscientists is. I guess my argument would be that as a discipline, we are better off integrating ourselves with others who think differently. As we try to solve, and I think, Claudia, you pointed this out when we chatted yesterday, the difficulty of complex systems and complex problems, and that they cannot be solved by single investigators using single techniques in isolation. And that's the world we're facing. So I don't know if that made any sense, but my view is that the better we can integrate ourselves as geoscientists into these big cross-disciplinary problems, the healthier in the end our discipline is going to be.
Thank you, Paul. Now, I know we're running a little over our prepared time for questions, but panelists, Camilla, Claudia, do you have anything you'd like to add on before we move on to our next question and audience questions? By the way, everyone who's joining us, I know there's just so much exciting stuff to share and talk about. So if you are able to hold on and stay a little bit longer than 5 p.m., we would really appreciate it. We really do want to get to audience questions.
I think I think everything that Paul said is true about the direction of the geosciences and the need to become increasingly more integrated with other science, not only with other sciences, but with social sciences as well, because the problem into this big complicated mix of challenges we face from climate, including climate change and water resources, we threw humans in the mix, and so we've got to work with the social sciences and I think when you have the luxury of being in a school as large as the Jackson School, we can do very broad science just by reaching across the table, reaching into our other units. But we also are working very hard on campus to integrate intercollegially. And I just wanted to bring up an example of a master's program that we have at UT. It's called Energy and Earth Resources. And it's a thesis-based master's program that incorporates not only coursework, but mentorship as well, thesis mentorship across the geosciences, business, engineering, law, and policy. And really what it's trying to do is give students the interdisciplinary skills needed to work in resource sciences, in resource jobs. And what we're finding is our students are flying off the shelf, not just for energy companies, though, but they are going to reinsurance companies, they're going to financial firms, they're going to tech companies. And so sort of echoing another theme that both Camilla and Paul brought up, I think the important thing that we're challenged to do right now is to make sure that no matter what we teach, no matter what our curriculum, that we focus on teaching those skills those skills that will have transferable value across a lifetime. And I think they all I think Camilla listed many of them: data analysis, critical thinking, spatial thinking, and teamwork is also a very important one. So again, I think we all teach what we can teach what we have the expertise to teach, but we can teach it in such a way that the skills that we're using are transferable to other areas.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. All right, so due to time, we're going to transition into our last question, which has to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I'll hand it over to Rachelle.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nicole. So Claudia, we'll start with you for this theme 3. What tangible things has your department done and implemented to increase diversity and inclusion? What are some of the challenges that have been encountered in creating a more diverse geo program?
Well, I mean, I think one of the challenges I raised before was that students are simply enter college without having a good sense of what geosciences is about. And we have a long-standing program at the Jackson School called GeoForce. It's, I think, almost 20 years old now, which is a K-12 education and outreach program. It's designed to increase the number and diversity of students coming into STEM, all STEM fields, and particularly geosciences. It's been, the course includes summer field academies, summer virtual academies, as well as not just learning and education, but also skill building, life skill building opportunities. It's been very successful in the sense that well over 40% of the GeoForce graduates choose STEM as their major when they go to college. And they are graduating at a very high rate of 90% or something like that. So when they go into college, they stay there and they do well. Nicole Gonzalez is actually a GeoForce graduate. And we've been working now on additional programs that really see to the entire transition through the entire academic life cycle of the student. We think that there's opportunity to increase student success through transition to college programs that teach them some of the skills they need in college, as well as sort of preps them for their math and cognitive science courses. We have a similar program, again, to lead to more successful transitions to graduate school, to introduction to many of the tools that they might need to learn, to sort of ratchet down the fear factor that somebody might face when learning a new skill. But, you know, diversity isn't only about programs. I think this year in particular, and the last 2 years, the faculty, researchers, and students at the Jackson School have really been challenged by the human events of the last 2 years, as well as challenged directly by their dean to own diversity, if you will, to embed it or to really bake diversity into our workplace policies, our practices at the Jackson School, everything from student admissions to faculty hiring to pedagogy and performance evaluations. I think that there's room for improvement in all of these things. And the best and the way it will have lasting impact is if everyone sees it as their responsibility to continue to improve the school, to improve the workplace, to improve make more inclusive the environment of the school. So it's still depressing to see the numbers, frankly, of minority students in school. It hasn't increased, it hasn't improved in decades. And so we know we have a problem reaching students, and we really haven't solved that dilemma. I think part of it is just getting them in. As Geo4 shows, if you can get a student in, they'll stay in, they like it. But part of it is creating a follow-on workplace and environment where students can have success in school, and then workplaces in the outside world where students, where someone's career can be satisfying and doable, if you will, because it's always been a challenge. So I remember going to GSA meetings and early in the oh God, I don't know what I should say, a long time ago, because I was one of the first class of women or group of women who really started showing up in any numbers. And we couldn't wait until, we were trying to think well in advance, until the 90s and the 2000s when women would be plentiful, and yet they're not even yet. I mean, we still, the women are still 50-50 at the assistant and associate ranks, and it just thins out from there. So clearly there's work to be done in our environment and in creating environments where everyone can succeed. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Claudia, for sharing that. It's very inspirational and definitely gives me hope for the future. Camila, can you comment at all on any of the initiatives or steps that your university and specifically your department has taken to improve the diversity and inclusion?
Yes, thank you, Rachelle. And I need to follow up with you, Claudia, about Geoforce. We know about it, and we are kind of trying to model after you guys. But one of our core values in our strategic plan here in the Boone Pickens School of Geology is DEIG. And we added G to it, the globalization. Because based on our demographics, here in our school at OSU, we have many international faculty and students. So we feel that that better speaks about us, to be, diversity, equity, inclusion, and globalization. So that's one of the 5 core values in our strategic plan. And of course, diversity definitely brings new perspectives and ideas. We just applied for the AGU Bridge program. Maybe Jackson School, is already, part of it, but we feel that that's helpful. So out of 20 faculty here at OSU, 9 of us were born, raised, and received our bachelor's degrees in other countries. And, that brings a lot of diversity and lot of different cultures. And most of our PhD students come from overseas. I said we have 37 right now, but primarily developing countries. Actually the biggest contingent that we have, some of our students here on the call, come from Nigeria. We have trained faculty and staff members to be diversity and equity advocates. OSU has such a training program that we benefited from in the last 3 years, leading to a new faculty search. And we've run several faculty searches. Our faculty attended an implicit bias workshop because it's about new hires in every regard, not only students but the faculty as well. And now we have a DEI committee of our advisory board. As I said, we have a very engaged advisory board, mostly alumni, some friends, but they are helping us increasing the diversity in our programs. And actually, as we speak, they are working on a survey that they want to send to us and kind of see what's the, where we are at and where we want to go with increasing, diversity at OSU. I would say OSU is a designated primary white institution. I only learned that when I came to OSU, coming from the East Coast. I didn't even know that there was such a designation.
Thank you so much for sharing. Go ahead, Nicole.
Thanks, Camilla. Okay, so we have a few audience questions. Arpita and Petra, would you guys like to ask your question live? If so, speak. Arpita, do you have your question? I can also read it out loud if you'd like.
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you.
Yes.
Claudia, you were mentioning, Claudia, I'm from East Tennessee State University, where you said you were in UT for 18 years. That was just felt like home. So at East Tennessee State University, our new dean is trying to figure out, other than enrollment, what could be the other measures which would help restructure, like the performance criteria of a department. And again, it's all enrollment-based model. But then we have individualized teaching. We have first-generation students who need one-on-one mentoring, but the administration does not understand. All is like how many students you have. So I'm just wondering, when you mentioned restructure performance criteria, what are your thoughts on that?
Part of the criteria I'm talking about would be to value mentoring students, mentoring master's students, mentoring students from underrepresented groups that may or may not require additional time in mentoring. Bringing, I think we need to value the time people give to making events happen. We have, for example, several recruiting events that don't happen unless someone steps up to the plate and does the work. And so the challenge is, I think, when people put physical and mental calories into something, then they should receive recognition for those things. So that, and another thing is recognizing success outside of just publication or external funding. Although I'll be honest with you, there's a lot of external funding to be had surrounding DEI and surrounding geoeducation, and lots of different things other than standard, disciplinary research. So it means encouraging faculty and rewarding them for reaching across colleges to try to create either a curriculum or courses or research efforts that blend skills and that would involve students in I think convergent research. That kind of work doesn't always result in as many papers as a disciplinary study, for example, or papers in journals that a department head may be familiar with. But we've got to learn how to give people how to appreciate these efforts by people. So that's another thing people can do. You can also look at the success of your undergraduates, monitor the success of your undergraduates. What are they doing when they leave? And finally, and I found this as a department head, provosts and presidents will respect money. I don't know how to put that delicately. And oftentimes in every research, in every department I've ever been in, not very many, but as a student as well, the bachelor and master students are the students who give back to their alma mater and give back to their department. PhD students, less so. I don't know whether it's because, by the time you're done with your PhD, you're also sort of for at least a decade, kind of done with that environment. You need to get out and do something different and be somewhere different and have different friends. But our bachelor's and master's degree students oftentimes return more to the school in development support, in donations and gifts, and that's something that we obviously can make a very big case about in the Jackson School, because Jack Jackson had a bachelor's degree from our school. And so that's another thing that some schools have been able to use to their advantage.
Thank you so much, Claudia. I mean, I was just frantically taking notes, and those were wonderful pointers. And I hope I can use some of those for my future planning.
Best of luck.
Thanks.
That is so
Question.
Claudia, about master students giving back. I mean, we are kind of like you guys, much smaller though, but, the same thing here. Of course, we have a much younger program, but our bachelors and masters are very engaged. Much more, I would say.
Thank you, guys. We're getting a lot more questions. Petra, would you like to ask your question?
Sure. Hi, thanks. My question is specifically for Paul. I'm from San Francisco State University, and we have a small department which has literally been reduced in faculty in half over the last 7 or 8 years or so due to retirements and people leaving. In your article, you stated that that you had gotten some hints in the previous years that your department may have been in some trouble, and that you worked some to do degree modifications, but it was sort of around the periphery. And I'm wondering if you could go back in time, what you think would have changed. And the reason why it's a question specifically for you is that number, I really relate to that. Like when you have a small number of faculty, there's only so much you can do. So I'm just curious in hindsight, what you would have changed if you could go back.
Again, I think I need to answer this personally and not for the whole department, because I think they're really different views from different people. And I've done a lot of processing of this in the last 6 to 8 months, thinking through this. I for a while thought there were things we could have done, and one of them I did, several other, mostly junior faculty did, but some of our older faculty did too, was try to bring up some new courses. So one faculty created a course in extraterrestrial life that drew 200 students. I built this new climate class a couple of years ago that drew 170 students. And I think we got in our head that that would be enough. If we could bring more student credit hours in, we had this functioning master's program. It didn't actually even enter my radar about number of majors. And UVM's a little funny that way, in that we have environmental science major with a geology concentration that actually years ago I was hired to start an environmental geology concentration in geology, but then it moved out to environmental science, and it was unclear whether those were really counted or not, but that's all bookkeeping. I actually think it's something more fundamental, that I came into a department that had a very geologic tradition, whether you like that geologic tradition or not. It was a tradition of solid earth geology for the most part. And a feeling that, that was something that was valued by several of our former chairs as being really important. And it was a culture that permeated the department. And I think we sort of, in many ways, I don't know how else to put this, and it will undoubtedly offend some of my colleagues, we got stuck in a rut, and we couldn't look hard enough. And I don't want to blame anybody for that. It's a collective failure of all of us to not sit down and see overall where the field was going, to look really hard at our numbers, to look at student interest, to start doing things like asking students, what do you need? And yet we were turning out people who were, the hard part is we were turning out students who were getting jobs. And so you couldn't say, oh, we're training these people on stuff they're not using, because they were using it. But we failed on the number of undergraduate majors metrics. And, who knows, 2020 hindsight, should we have been teaching more exciting intro courses? Claudia and I were talking about this yesterday about, should every faculty member have been in teaching a large gen ed course? Now, I have mixed feelings about that, because I love teaching gen ed courses. I can't imagine anything more fun than going in front of 200 students and making geology exciting. But I know full well that there are people for whom that is either sheer terror or they just wouldn't excel at it. So I don't feel right saying everyone's got to do this. But I can't tell you what would have made a difference, but I can tell you that you got to poke your ears up and open your eyes, because just saying we're trying a little bit or no, it has to be like it used to be, it didn't work for us. And again, I don't want to cast blame on anybody, because I would say we were all equally at fault, and it was part of a culture built not in a year, 5 years, 10 years, but it's a culture of 40 years that was hard to break. And who knows? I mean, some of it could just be random, right? I mean, they were cutting all over arts and sciences. And, lots of people have said to me, well, they just needed to take one science, just so it didn't look like they were taking all humanities, because there were a lot of humanities programs that were devastated by this at the university. So I don't know if I've answered your question. I don't have an answer. It's a really tough place. And I think if you asked all of us who were on this call, you would get a different answer from each person.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. There's a question in the chat from Anai. It is, some studies have shown that among undergraduates, the geoscience rated lower on their ability to help society and the environment, easy to find a job, and making a lot of money than most other sciences. These studies also showed that underrepresented minority students rated helping society and the environment and having prestige as important factors for choosing a career. Any ideas on ways to help change these perceptions among and misconceptions as a way to also attract more underrepresented minorities?
If I can address that first.
Absolutely, please.
Yeah, I'm thinking, I saw that question, and because it's something we've thought a lot about as well. The fact of the matter is, this is just about students not having experience, not being educated, not having seen what the breadth of the geosciences are. They're just coming out of high school without a very keen sense. If you ask them what a lawyer does, what a doctor does, they don't have to have a lawyer or a doctor in their family to have a pretty good idea of what the person does basically for a job. Ask them what a geoscientist does, and they don't have a very good idea. If they're in Texas or Oklahoma, they might guess that you drill for oil and gas, you're involved in oil and gas extraction. But so we need to change that. We need to educate students. And the best way to do that are through alumni. We try to engage alumni in making videos, video chats, little 3-minute video chats that we can share that sort of say, this is who I am, this is what I've done. Oftentimes they start out in a geoscience job and then they go to something else. But I think seeing an example, I'm a geoscientist and I work for Aon. I work for reinsurance. I'm their geo interpreter. I'm the one who tells the mathematicians and the statisticians how coastal processes are going to impact their models, or students who, are working in data science or in tech companies. So we try to engage them. We bring them back for periodically to speak directly to our undergraduates, and we try to get them in front of our Geoforce group. And so it's just really about educating students. I had a student in an environmental sciences program that we are part of say, well, I really like the geoscience track, but I want to work in environmental work, and I think it will look bad if it says geo on my resume, because they see geoscience as being associated with fossil fuels. And I just simply had to say, let me tell you my experience, and from talking to hundreds of employers would rather hire a geoscientist than a biologist for environmental work every day, unless what they're doing is a fish survey or something equivalent. If they're doing soil surveys or general water surveys or general whatever, if they're doing a cleanup, they want the geoscientist because we have the breadth of skills and the spatial understanding. And so education, every opportunity you get is I think the key.
I want to toss one more thing into that had dawned on me on the last couple of questions, which is that I think as we broaden geoscience education, we are going to broaden the applicant pool in terms of people who join us. And that comes from a friend of mine, Joe Whitaker, who's the provost at Jackson State. And he and I've had long chats over this, but that for many people in this country, and his best example is Black students at historically Black colleges, geoscience is not anywhere on their radar because there's simply very few geoscience departments. Yet the environment and environmental sciences and jobs and consulting and environmental engineering are very much on their mind. So I think one of the benefits of broadening from the traditional geoscience curriculum and description, like you say, Claudia, is that it's going to make DEI easier. It's going to make us easier. It's going to make it easier for us, and it may be the only path by which to diversify, a predominantly white middle-class field, is to figure out a way to, and I don't want to use the word rebranding because that's too brash for this, but to really communicate the fact that you can get a geoscience degree and it matters, and you can do things that matter for society and for the planet. So I don't know if we want to call that, it's not even implicit bias, it's just it's an inadvertent narrowing of our pools because of what we are known as.
Now, if I can add to that, we are not afraid of rebranding. We are rebranding here in the Boone Pickens School of Geology at Oklahoma State. Because, of the ever-changing landscape, we just need to bring that narrative to the community, because we know we are, sustainable, resilient. And actually, I just wanted to cite here from our distinguished alum, Rick Fritz, who, he's the past president of AAPGA. He said that at one time, and I took a note, geoscientists make good employees across many disciplines because they are very analytical, technologically savvy, are problem solvers and spatial thinkers, embrace all of the sciences and mathematics. That's what we tell, prospective students, add value and create wealth. Wealth, wealth is good, have good communication skills, written and verbal. We just need to create that narrative. And that's why we are rebranding, at OSU. And it's not easy, so, we've been trying to do this, for quite a while. But that's why I'm saying, if anything, as a take-home message, we need to have a united front. We need to work together. And professional societies are key. AAPG, you guys are doing this, thank you. SEG, AGU, you are all working toward making our field more relevant. It is relevant and we know it, but to bring it to the community and let them know that we are sustainable, we are resilient, and we are societally, relevant.
One of the things that we're doing, as not just as with the GeoForce program, but also with our recruiting at the undergraduate level, kind of addresses the fact that not only do the students not know what geologists do, but their family doesn't either. And family is very important to many students. And so we are trying to take the time to take time with family to try to introduce them to the geosciences, to give them a sense of what geoscientists do, and the fact that we oftentimes hold professional positions at high salaries, and that the work, from my perspective, is out there and will continue for many, many, many years. And it's not a dying field. It's actually a field with intense pressure on it right now. And so that's another important way I think we can reach out to students. And I think it's especially important in recruiting students from underrepresented groups.
I think that's a really great point, Claudia. I was just, I'm part of Geo Ambassadors here at UT, where we try to change those perceptions and misconceptions by better understanding the communities that we want to recruit from. And I was just telling someone that my grandma still does not fully understand what I do as a geologist. she does not quite get it, but that's okay. I still try to teach her and tell her, but it is hard. So I think that is really important. I'm happy to hear that. Okay, great. Are there any other questions? Please feel free to raise your hand if there are any other questions. There seems to be a really cool conversation in the chat as well.
We often inevitably get a good conversation going through talking and another good conversation going in the chat. But I think that's great because it's just more engagement, which is really what we want out of these events. So thank you everyone for all of your talking in the chat.
Yes, and I just want to point out, Beth, she just said, I wonder if there's a way to extend the GeoForce program to smaller departments and across state lines, which I wonder that too. As a student of the program, I've always wondered like how we can incorporate other schools and other states.
Yeah, we're not that far away. I'm in Arkansas. And as a small department, we struggle with this. We have a large metropolitan university. We have a large minority student population. They don't come to the geosciences, and we try. And again, we have not moved the needle. And so I really like that idea, but like everybody says, there's 5 of us in my department.
Yeah,
we've lost people. We're a majority female department, 3 women, 2 men.
that's unusual.
But we're all white.
I think the model of GeoForce can certainly be copied. The GeoForce program itself is I'll be honest with you, quite frankly, it's a challenge for us to keep it funded. It's a long, NSF doesn't fund ongoing programs, they fund new research. And so GeoForce began as a joint effort between the Jackson School, once it had using the Jackson Endowment, and many oil companies who were looking to improve the diversity of their workforce. And as time has gone on, some of those companies have disappeared. Some of them have disappeared from existence, but others others have changed focus in what they're doing. And some view that GeoForce as a social program, others view it as a recruiting program. And we're constantly trying to find new donors, private and industrial. We make the deal that we support the salaries of all the people who work on GeoForce, and then we use industry support and donor support to support the costs of the students, to give them their stipends, to get them out in the fields, to run the costs of the program. And it's frankly very expensive. And that doesn't mean you can't do it. You might not be able to do something like this at a smaller scale. But I think what it has tried to do is, we don't work with all schools. We have a definitive pipeline. We have very specific schools we've been going back to. It helps us recruit because students go back and they say, oh, I had this great time, and that helps us recruit other students. So I encourage you to try to do something, run it as a short program in the summer. You don't have to make an extended program. It could be a 1-week program. It could be, I think the secret is that it needs to be continuous. You need to stay in contact with these students through multiple years. You have to expose them to different things through those years. I'm sure that it could be run on a much thinner shoestring than we run it on. And I think it could be very successful for people. I know that there is a GeoForce program, GeoForce Alaska, that has developed, and I really, as a model, we took the model ourselves from Fort Valley State University, and their I guess it was not their CDEP, but their MC program.
Yeah, I want to add real quick that GeoForce actually this past year just added a virtual only program. Since we had to transition to virtual academies in 2020 and this past summer, they actually just introduced a virtual program. So it'll continue to run every summer, but it will stay virtual. So that's an option too. You don't have to invest so much money and maybe like the trips. You can do something virtually as well.
And seeing Nicole here reminds me, we get an awful lot of help from our alumni,
yes.
Because we draft GeoForce alumni into helping us teach academies and mentor students through the program. So, once you have a start, you actually have a self-generating source help, because students who have a good experience want to give back.
Absolutely. Most of the counselors are previous Geoforce students that come back.
So what would you think of an EnviroForce to go broader?
So there is,
that'd be great.
Yeah, there is. I think the program as a whole, like it is still Geoforce, but it also kind of was rebranded like a STEM Force.
Okay.
So yeah, that's great.
I'm one of these word people who thinks that geo means everything. Geo means everything. Geo. It means environment. It means atmosphere, lithosphere, biosphere. I know that many people feel there's a large distinction between geoscience and earth science, but in Latin there really isn't. You know,
you're taking me back 45 years.
If we take a clue from the paleontologists who speak italics all the time, then we can just say that, you know, geo is all encompassing.
Yep.
Yeah, right, Claudia, you know, coming from Romania, you know, Romanian is the closest living language to Latin. That's exactly what I say. Geoscience, earth science, you know, it's all the same. It's got the same etymology.
Sarah, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I had a quick question. Can any of the panelists comment on the role of professional organizations and groups like the AAPG Women's Network in helping to further some of these efforts and maybe help create some connections between these boundaries and programs launching? And follow up on that is how to get faculty members more involved, because we typically have a lot of student engagement, but not necessarily a lot of faculty engagement.
Those are kind of two different questions, you know, Tara. So, you know, as far as professional societies, actually being here in Oklahoma, you know, we really have appreciated having the headquarters for AAPG and SCG here in Oklahoma. So we really appreciate it. And, you know, we are working very closely with both AAPG and SCG on our professional science masters. You know, we are in the process of finalizing MOUs as how the professional societies can help us, you know, with this new degree program that has quite a few concentrations and speaks to the professionals. So, you know, that there is a very you know, clear connection there, you know, because we are also looking at instructors, you know, you name it. You know, as far as the other question, you know, how to get faculty more engaged with such you know, with like the AAPG Women's Network, I do not have a holy grail for that. You know, I think, you know, faculty need to be, you know, to be cognizant of how they are helped in their tenure and promotion and their professional development themselves to be associated with professional societies. And for those who are, we actually see that, you know, they are, you know, perhaps more successful because, you know, they network better, you know, they are more successful in research grant funding, they are more successful in attracting students, but, you know, that's kind of work in progress, you know. That's my take.
I think to a certain extent, you also have to hold faculty responsible for doing something. I don't think it's, I actually don't think it's an option to do nothing. We try to have at least one faculty-centric training or workshop every year that I want people to focus on. One training for students. We have a workplace expectations document that sort of spells out the nature of the academic relationships, what the expectations are for those relationships, what the expectations are for a respectful workplace, and everyone has to sign it every single year. So, and you know, they simply do. They simply have to sign that they have read it and that they agree to work by it. And there are consequences if you don't work by the document. I think you also just give people an opportunity to do things. I was really happy to see when the URGE program came out, I was blown away. We had 80 faculty and student members who participated for the entire URGE project. There were multiple pods at the Jackson School. Some of that is just, and 80 is a large number even at the Jackson School. So, and their goal as multiple pods was to come up with ideas for improving the environment at the Jackson School. And so I have a long list of things that we can try, and addressing the professional societies directly. We're indebted to the professional societies, frankly, for all that they do. Each of them does something very different. They reach out to people very differently. I've noticed AAPG does a lot of webinars and giving people a lot of opportunities to engage and listen. AGU is very interested in training the people who will train the students and getting faculty members involved in programs. And they just had their landings program is just starting now, where they'll be training faculty and staff champions for diversity. And GSA has always contributed to student training through its research grants and through its posing an opportunity, especially through their sectional meetings, to give students an opportunity to learn how to present as professionals. And so we can't do all of that, and none of us can do, not a single department can do all of that. And so we actually are indebted to the societies, and we thank you more than anything else, Tara.
Okay, thank you guys so much. This has been a wonderful discussion. I do want to remind everyone, Stefano has put in the chat a list of upcoming events for the AAPG Women's Network. So, oh yes, and we have slides. So the most, it's actually right around the corner on November 3rd. We have this How to Develop Transferable Skills for Any Work Environment, which is going to be on Zoom. So if that looks interesting, please register. The link is in the chat. We also have 2 other events coming up. We have the Geology of Wine and Cheese. So if any of you guys participated in the Geology of Beer, then this is going to be something similar, but with wine and cheese. So it'll be fun. How caves influence wine and cheese. It'll be, you can order your wine and cheese for the event, and also kind of, maybe get other people in on it too. So that's on November 12th. So do register if that sounds interesting. And then for the webinar series, we will have Dr. Rebecca Dodge joining us for our November/December webinar. We'll send out more info about that as we plan for that. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining us in this discussion. We really, really appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you next month.
Thank you very much for allowing us.
Thank you.
Thank you to the panelists.
So much.
Great seeing all of you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, what a wonderful event.